Posy Gloves here, and this is another video in the Harmor from the Ground Up tutorial series. Today we're going to be talking about this whole global section right here, and there's a lot of buttons and knobs. Some of them are important, some of them are less important. Let's explore, shall we? So first off, we have this global menu. You click it and it shows you a whole bunch of stuff. You could copy preset, copy part, lock part. We're going to talk about these things. And then you can also actually select chorus presets and reverb presets. And then they have about Harmor and imageline.com. But it's interesting that they would put these here. We're going to talk about these, so don't worry about that. But you can also access them from the effects area too. So that's just an interesting option. I never use it, but you know you've got a good program where they're putting controls in places that I guess sort of makes sense, but it's just interesting. I don't know. I just find it interesting that they decided to put that there. So what is this whole part deal all about? Well, we have this A and this B part. And what it is like, for example, there are two parts. It's as if we have two screens. And right now we're on part A, but we could go to part B. So if we made some changes to part A, say we turn up the sub, the first harmonic sub, and move the filter, we get that. But if we go over to B, as you can see, our filter and our sub, we just flip back and forth a few times, they change. So they're different. These are different. So you can essentially have two sounds running at the same time. Really cool. To activate the parts, you have to, so for example, right now, I'm hitting the keyboard, nothing's happening because neither part is active. If I turn on part A, we get our low pass thing. And if I turn on, but we're looking at part B right now. If I turn on part B, we get the normal sound, and I can turn them both on. And you see now we have a lower harmonic being emphasized, which actually would solve a problem I was thinking about earlier. And we have this part link option, so we can link the two parts. And now when we make a change on one, as you see, our part linking blinks when we move it. It is changed on both of them. So now the filter's been lined up. Let's say bang, we'll change that, and bang, A. So now it's the same sound. Now let's undo part link, and let's, now we can, so this blend right now is 50-50. We can make it only the blend A by moving this slider, or only blend B. So we could create some really interesting movements and effects by creating two sounds that are very similar and then moving them over. Now you can actually copy. So if we go over here to global, you can copy the part A, for example, the part that you're on, you have selected, copy part, and you go to part B, and you can paste it. Copy part, paste part. As you see, now our unison just turned on because A has unison. So that is parts. It's an extraordinarily powerful tool. Like, I use this all the time, and especially when I'm making electro. I can have a really distorted saw wave running up against a square wave, and it just provides this resound that's just so glorious. I need to make a video about resing because that's the psychoacoustic stuff. It occurred to me when I first learned about psychoacoustics. That's another topic, but it's really interesting. So we have an LFO, and I have not talked about LFOs yet in this series. So an LFO is something that turns a target on or off. And the reason it's called LFO is low frequency oscillator. So this is an oscillator below the human audible range of hearing. However, you could go, so the human range is from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz on a healthy person, but most people can't hear 20K, most people can't hear 20. Most of the time, you actually want to remove parts of that because they'll just ruin, well, not ruin, but your speaker will be moving, and you won't even be able to hear the frequency anyway. So you might as well just remove that and have a cleaner perceived mix, because you tend to feel the low end. And some people, yeah, 70 hertz is usually what people, 70 hertz, 60, that's what they're talking about when they talk about bass sounds, normally not 20 hertz. Most speakers can't even reproduce 20 hertz. So anyways, this LFO is something that controls, so it moves, it turns something on or off, usually from 1 time a second to 20 times a second, depending on what you select. So I'll give a quick example. We have our volume here, and right now it's been set to an envelope. And I'm going to talk about this later. But we're going to go to LFO. And here's our LFO. And so right now it's off. So we have this, but let's turn our LFO on. and you can hear it getting softer and louder. We can change how wide this is. So this is only turning it on and off a little bit. We can make it very drastic and max and minimum. And see, we're getting holes now in our spectrum. By the way, if you didn't know, this spectrum display is CPU intensive. So if you're composing or working or producing, I guess, on whatever you're working on, you may want to close these to save CPU if you're having problems with that. But we can turn up the speed. And you can do a whole bunch of other cool things. Just showing you how to link things to an LFO right now. We're not going to deal with that right now. Oh, but on the subject of LFO, this controls the maximum and minimum value. So these values are maxed and minned, right? If that's a word. We can turn it down. As you see now, it's as if there's no LFO. So this is a way of automating these things. But you can actually automate these knobs down here too if you want. And you can actually inverse it and go the other way. Which, since our shape is symmetrical, doesn't really sound that different. But it could sound different. By default, it's on in the usual direction. But just so you know about that, that is there. That's an option. And you can link it to anything that has a parameter or an envelope of some kind. So kind of cool. All right. So we have the velocity switch. So these are our volume. So we have a pre-effects volume and a post-effects volume. Let me reset those. And the velocity makes it whether or not we'll make this velocity sensitive. Generally, you want this on. So we have pitch, because if you're working your piano roll and you move your velocity around, no bueno if all of a sudden it stops working because you accidentally turn this off. We have pitch. This just sets the playback pitch range. So I'm going to hit just one note over and over and over and move it around. So that's pretty cool. They do have... oh, I guess it's not in here. I know they have envelopes for it, though. They have a pitch envelope somewhere in here. There's a pitch envelope. Here it is. And you can automate the pitch over time, so you can create laser sounds and things like that. All right, so that's the pitch. That's what these things do. Now you have this mod thing down here. You have X, Y, and Z. And Z moves front and back. Y is up and down. X is left and right. And this is really pretty cool. You can link parameters to this. And instead of going over here, for example, and moving the frequency around, you can right-click, go to Quick Map to, and you can link it to your velocity. So you can have your frequency respond differently. When you hit your key harder, ideally you'll get more frequency. Your filter cutoff will move up. You could change it to be modulation X, which is what we'll do. And we're given this mapping. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio right now. It's a linear ratio. It goes right through the middle. That's one way of telling. And so if we hit our key, and you'll see we start off in the middle here. So and we can control it using the X parameter. Why would you want that? Well, we could also say link our quick map it, our resonance to X as well. So as we turn our filter up, our resonance will turn up too. Oh, our resonance is... Oh, well, you wouldn't hear the resonance, of course. So... Well, we should hear the resonance. Let's turn it up. So we've mapped our resonance to this. Now, it would be really cool if the knobs moved. If the knobs moved when we did stuff like this. But they just don't. So that's just something we're going to have to live with. We can change this to be a nonlinear relationship. I bet it would be pretty CPU intensive to have knobs moving. So now our resonance will respond much differently. You see how our resonance is interacting. So you could multi-link parameters to the Y and the Z, and you can even grab this and move it back and forth. Unfortunately, I think you have to use Z. There are some controllers out there that actually... you could buy controllers that will allow you to manipulate all three at the same time. But ideally, it's because you want to automate a lot of stuff. You want things to behave in a specific relationship. You can use this to set up a matrix for yourself. So really cool. All right, moving on. So now that we have those two things figured out, I'm going to turn off part B because we don't need it right now. So I've talked about the vibrato and the legato, but we have this limit function right here. So legato, you know, you hit one note. you hit another note, and it will slide between the two notes as if you're on an instrument blowing one continuous stream through your instrument while pushing multiple keys. If you're not a musician and you don't understand what I just said, just watch the example. So you can do that. And we've talked about manipulating the time and all those things using these settings over here. And the limit. Now, you have a limit here too. And right now the limit is off. You can turn it all the way on or only partially. What this does is it selects a frequency range that legato will occur in. So right now we have a very big frequency range from 20 hertz to I don't know what this is. You could see it up in the little information window. So unfortunately they give it to you in cents rather than harmonics, which is a interesting choice considering this whole thing is additive. But so we'll hit some notes and we see that we still have our legato, but if we take it down, we'll make a very small range. We have our polyphony back, so multiple notes at the same time. If I go all the way down, let me turn the range up a little bit so you can hear it gliding. You can see it gliding, but if you go just a bit farther up, you see that. So this leads me to believe that this is also a logarithmic knob. But anyways, that's legato. You may want the limit thing. You may not. Maybe you want your highs to be free from your low for articulation purposes or something. Like, I don't know. Get creative. Make something cool with it. And we have legato. We have velocity. Velocity links the release and attack time of your legato. Again, covered in the other video, I believe. Anyways, velocity should be pretty intuitive. You hit it harder, the attack and release time of your legato will respond differently. So here's your time. I do not have velocity engaged on my keyboard right now because it does not have that many velocity levels. So I don't enjoy playing with it because I could hit it just a little bit harder and suddenly it's much louder. So when you're buying a keyboard, make sure you've got ample velocity levels when you're buying it. That's one difference between price. But I'm actually pretty happy with the way it turned out. Anyways, we have Porta. Breaking off from that. Portamento. And we've also talked about Portamento. It'll jump from the last note you played, the last pitch that you let go of, last note off command it received, and it will jump it to the next note you hit. So it'll be a quick glide. So the farther the glide, typically, there's ways of augmenting this. In most synths, the farther the glide, the bigger the jump. But you can also augment the time so it takes a much longer time, as you can see, but we can make it shorter. And if the notes are closer, it's a little less audible usually, if your time is really fast. Anyways, that's what these do. That is that whole shebang right there. That's pretty cool. Now we have one more, well, technically two more things. We have Strum. So let's say you want to make a guitar sound. Like we get this going here and we have this kind of thing. We're like, oh, we're going for physical modeling. We're going to model a guitar. This is as close as I could get because I'm just not feeling it today. And I can't think of anything to do to make it more realistic. I'm having a hard time. And I say, oh, well, I just had some inspiration. I can make it strum like a guitar. And that's what this is here for. So this offsets the time right here. So you know how on a guitar, when you're going down it with a pick or up it with a pick, which would make sense why we have an up right here and here's a down. We have alternate and random, which we'll talk about. You hit the notes in a particular order, right? So like sometimes the higher notes are first and sometimes the lower notes are first. That's what this up and down simulate, and the time is how long that takes to happen. So if I hit my chords, even though I'm hitting it at the same time, we get that strumming effect. And we can actually change the tension, so how long, even further how long it takes. You can actually hear it change direction here. It changes the emphasis on the notes, I believe. That might just be total bullcrap, but I believe that's what I remember doing. Obviously I don't use this that often, but I'm thinking about using it more and more for ARPs. It seems like a really interesting option for really quick stabby chord ARPs, like inverted chord ARPs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it, but you should go study some music theory. So we have our time option. We can do down, and we can do alternating. So it's as if your guitar player is going up and down and up and down and up and down. And then we have random, which it just chooses up or down at random. So that's pretty cool. And then the last thing, man, I know the tension has to do, I believe it's a further time augmentation. I don't know. I know it's either time augmentation or the emphasis of the note. I can't remember which one it is. Tension wants me to believe it's the emphasis of the note, but then we have this weird offset image sort of thing. So I think it may be the time on how the notes are put closer together or spread out. All right, anyways, the last thing we have here is we have an info bank, and you can type in your name and put all your dandy stuff about this particular patch. You can come up here to save. You can go to save preset as, and you can create a folder and save it in there. And then once it's saved, you should be able to go to presets. Your presets may not be in tree display like mine is, but if you go hover over presets, then you'll have this huge thing. I've chosen to do this. But anyways, you will have, so I have a Composing Gloves folder with more folders in it, and it lets you select the thing you want. So that is pretty nifty. If you have any questions about the global section, drop them in the comments. If you have anything you'd like to know, drop it in the comments. If you have a compliment, drop it in the comments. Subscribe, and have a blessed day.